I'm Mark Stevenson, and I was art director on Cameo Elements of Power. The first person to influence the look of Cameo was an animator called Richard Boucher. He had worked on previous Rare titles and was trained in classical hand-drawn animation. An obvious visual starting point for Cameo's character is that she was a fairy and a princess, although later to be called an elf. She needed to look graceful, feminine, and in touch with nature, but also be a strong female lead. First and foremost, ideas for how our characters look comes from what they do in the game and those practical considerations. Cameo always had a magical hit bag from the outset because she needed somewhere to store things. She also had the jeweled headband because we needed to contain the element of power. In contrast, Calus is pretty much a classic archetypal villain design. From the outset, she had the black dress, the dark hair, the pale skin, designed to be the opposite of Cameo's goodness. Cameo's original costume was inspired by ancient Greek clothing, but was changed with the console version. She needed to look more mature, and the new look was inspired by Native American patterns and culture. In the GameCube days of Cameo, we had plans for a larger number of monsters across more elements. Some were used to travel across the levels, others being purely for combat, able to use elemental moves like freezing things or breathing fire. However, as the project progressed, we scaled the number down. Each environment had to work to our elemental mechanics. They also had to fit the narrative points. We drew the Fairy Kingdom as a floating island, and this was really to portray it as a heavenly utopia in the sky where these unearthly magical creatures lived. The battlefield that we introduced for the Xbox 360 version was probably the most challenging level to create. It was a massive environment, bigger than any we'd built before, and linking all the different diverse parts of the world together. And if that wasn't challenging enough, we also populated it with thousands of trolls and a load of epic battles. Again, abilities define how trolls look. Regular trolls look strong, muscular, and powerful, whereas the archer trolls are much easier to defeat and look less imposing and less protected in their light armor. The bomb trolls are little irritating guys that are obviously weedy, so use bombs to keep you at bay. We did have elemental trolls too, designed to be funny hybrids. They tried to capture the use of magic by splicing elemental monsters with trolls and created these mutated but funny freaks. The troll tech, being a fantasy world, had a kind of steampunk powered aspect applied to it. There was always a strong intent to create a clear division. Cameo and the monsters represented nature, magic, and the mystical, whereas the trolls were about brute force and technology. Thorn was about reinforcing that visceral, animalistic aspect of strength being power. So he was naturally very big compared to the regular trolls. We had a couple of early designs where he was more demon-like, but these felt too far removed, so he came back to looking closer to the other trolls. The project was a labour of love. 6 years, 3 consoles, but still we finished and released it. Cameo got a lot of fans, and I would really love to make another one. It allowed us to let our imaginations go wild.
Hi, my name is Ryan Stevenson, one of the concept artists from Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts. Before the team even knew we were making a game about construction, we looked at the possibilities of revamping the characters in the Banjo universe. Our question, how do we update these characters without losing any of the charm of the original? We tried many different approaches, but ultimately settled on one that would retain the character's history. Originally called Banjo Buildy, the world had to look like it was assembled. Our surfaces were stitched, worn, and put together. This was a game where the players saw the progress via construction. Here's a selection of artwork for you to enjoy.
Initiating data breach. Hacking algorithms integrated.
Hi, I'm Will Overton, and I was art director on Perfect Dark Zero. One visual influence for PDZ was Captain Scarlet. It summed up what the art team and I were aiming for: a realistic yet fantastical world for a broad audience, a game that was a shooter for gamers of all ages. Making Joanna younger gave the team a level of freedom to explore her character. The team concluded that Joanna needed to display more personality, to be more than just bondy and cool. She would be talented but flawed, hot-headed and eager to get involved, eventually maturing as the story progressed. The team went through lots of ideas and designs for Joanna's outfits. I was keen that, as a character, she would be recognisable in lots of different costumes, and at one point hairstyles. Joanna's civilian attire was the trickiest, creating a casual outfit for a young woman set in the near future. You're doomed before you start, so I played it safe with combat trousers and a star vest and avoided anything too contemporary. For Joanna's suited costume, I ditched the chrome plating and tidied up her appearance. The new design aimed to get across a feeling of rebellious, untamed youth. Mayhem remained an uncomplicated character. She was a femme fatale, complete with silly name and a score to settle. Initially, I was adamant that she should not be over-sexualised, but eventually the archetype shone through and Mayhem retained her slinky design. Her final cyborg form was very much a late addition when the team began to ramp up the outlandishness of some of the characters. At this stage of the project, the team had decided that the characters should fit strong archetypes. Zhang Li is a traditional villain, a rich industrialist running organised crime across the world. His Chinese style can be traced back to the worlds of Fu Manchu and Iron Man's The Mandarin. His design was an attempt to mix the shapes and sizes of the game's characters. The idea of giving Zhang Li a wasting disease was to give him a reason for his actions. His motivation was to try and cure himself, not just to rule the world. Perfect Dark Zero's sense of scope meant that every level needed to be different. Joanna travelled the world, and originally went off-world to an orbiting space prison. The story was told on a global scale, with different locations to explore and infiltrate. Skeedar didn't feature in PDZ, but the team did try to hint at some alien presence. I very quickly did some hieroglyph designs to put on a temple wall, but they ended up everywhere, from magazines to the code cards that came with the special edition, and even Zhang Li's sword at the end of the game. During the game's story, Joanna has to play a virtual reality FPS game against Mayhem called Deathmatch. This is also the game's multiplayer arena mode. The team wanted to tie the two together so they felt part of the same universe. While many of the guns in PDZ were tried and trusted favourites, there was still a chance to have fun with some of the more fantastical weapons and gadgets. I mostly stayed away from the guns, but there were some unexpected designs, like the Shrimp Jack mind control pistol. This would shoot a small electronic shrimp at an enemy that would bury itself in their ear and allow them to be controlled from a distance. The Shrimp Jack eventually became the Psychosis gun in the final game. Perfect Dark Zero took 5 years to make and managed to span 3 different consoles. I'm happy that I got the experience, and it's great to see the game get a new lease of life 10 years on.
Analysis complete. Terminating link.
Hi, I'm Ryan Stevenson, and I was a concept artist on Viva Pinata. The game you see today wasn't the intended direction at all. Originally called My Garden for the Pocket PC, the animals had a simple cartoony style, but we needed a look that unified all the creatures of the world together, a style that implied a collection. I think some of my influences for Pinata came from what I was playing and watching at the time. Animal Crossing, Cubivore, Doshin the Giant and Watership Down, but that was only the first step. I like to immerse myself completely into the subject and find my reference by source. I didn't want this project to be a recreation of someone else's interpretation. At the time I was fascinated by Mexican culture, researching into festivals such as Day of the Dead and cultural things like luchadors. I instantly loved the treatment of vibrant colours and patterns, and I remembered being in a Mexican restaurant in New York seeing a piñata hanging from the ceiling. That's how it all kind of slotted in together, and the piñatas in our game were born. We created a rule set for the piñata. They don't have any muscles or bones. We wanted players to feel like they could crack them open. They had to feel like magical objects that had sprung to life. The first animals we focused on were things that you could find in a small holding, creatures that we already had a relationship with. From there we grew into something that felt more like a larger ecosystem. Every piñata was important, even something as small as an insect. Players could simply find their own favourites. A lot of work went into finding the quintessential animal form. For example, the dog went through many variations before we settled on his final design. I went with the terrier breed because I wanted him to look fun, and these dogs are packed with so much energy and personality, it seemed like a perfect match. Some of the designs I'm most proud of are the Hooty Fruity, Fudge Hog and Pyena, but the Raspberry is my absolute favourite. I like its simple patterning and his animation was a lot of fun. I actually made him into a real piñata and he's still knocking around the studio today, a little faded but still well loved. For Trouble in Paradise, we had to create even more animals. Chris Phillips joined the team and it was great to see someone take the piñata rule set and create something new. Just like fan art, it's always fun to see someone's take on the world. Pests were a new breed of piñata. With a little extra work from the player, they could be tamed and eventually would live in your garden. Again, we took the important elements from animals and streamlined their designs. The inspiration for the pest patterns were taken from tribal tattoos. This gave them a defining look when next to regular piñatas. The world in which all these creatures lived was given just as much care. It's all about attention to detail and the level of decoration. Even the dirt and grass has patterning. I wanted it to look handmade. Every mark you see has been placed individually. We wanted the player to feel as though there was more to this world, that it lived and breathed, that it existed. Having the garden helpers makes the world feel inhabited. Even all the villagers have backstories to make this place feel rich. For example, the post lady wanted to be a fashion designer, and that's why she adapted her own outfit. I loved working on Piñata. It was a fun game made by a great team. We were left to squirrel away and come up with ideas that we still feel proud of today.